And I always like to check to make sure my mute button is off. I've kind of made that a habit. Welcome to Executive Espresso. Let me get my camera adjusted here. And do we have a great guest for you guys today? We like to bring caffeinated conversations to the table for business owners and entrepreneurs. And today we have Dan Goldfield, and he is sharing out his brew of monk-trained wisdom on mindfulness and well-being. And you know, that's some of my favorite things. I actually go through a mindful process, as I call it, well, every morning when I'm making my caffeinated brew there. And Dan studied with a monk for 5 years. He meditated for 29,366 hours and counting. His mission is to normalize well-being for not just 1 billion, but 1,000,000,001 people. And I'll volunteer to be that one extra person there on top of the billion. He teaches how to unlock elite performance and unshakable confidence. We look forward to hearing about that. And I call him a master of the mechanics of mindfulness. And Dan, thank you for being on Executive Espresso. Well, what'd I leave out?
Oh, you were very thorough, Dr. Heath. That was fantastic. Very pleased to be here with you today. A little bit envious that, as I said before we got on here, I've had my coffee allowance for the day, and you're sat with your delicious fresh brew right there.
You know, I always hesitate to say this because inevitably I'm going to have some coffee counting person, and this is one of 8. This is one of 8. I don't just do psychology. Once upon a time, I thought I would do a side gig, and I went to Flint, Michigan for 2 weeks and trained as a barista. And so started a coffee shop at the local health club with the co-owner, and we did that for a while, and then that got to be pretty labor intense, but I still enjoy doing my barista thing every morning. Well, tell me, how did you start your journey into mindfulness? Where did you pop up one day and say, hey, you know, I've got some time on my hands. I think I'll go. I keep on bumping my camera. I got some time on my hands. I think I'll find a monk and meditate for nearly 30,000 hours.
It was stress, Doctor. Stress was where it all started for me. I actually felt that I didn't have the time at all. And I'm reminded actually of a quick story I'll share, which is of a student who approaches the Zen master and says, how long do I have to meditate to get enlightened? The master says 1 hour a day. The student says, I ain't got time for that. How am I ever going to fit that in? That's ridiculous. The master says, you need 2 hours a day.
I think I could use an extra hour on top of that. You know, it's for me, my journey into mindfulness started out, as I think it does with a lot of people, which is why I was looking forward to having you here today, with a lot of confusion. And people think that you have to be Buddhist. They think that you have to travel to the top of a mountain in Tibet. You have to find a monk. You have to kidnap that monk and chain that monk to you until, well, you make he or she teach you how to do mindfulness. And then there's a list of, I don't know, 50,000 steps on how to do it. And I've got to make sure I get every step right. And then at the end of it, I'm just a freaking ball of anxiety. And by the way, I've actually had patients that come back and well, they're actually very critical that I recommended mindfulness because they said I was more anxious when I stopped than when I started. I'm never doing that again. So let's talk about some mechanics of mindfulness and uncomplicated it for people.
Yeah, it's so much simpler than it's often presented, isn't it, Dr. Heath? And confusion was a large part of my journey because at one point I found, okay, I think I've just about gotten the hang of one set of 50,000 instructions. Then I found another. I found another completely different set of 50,000 instructions, and then another, and then another. I came to realize we're living in an unprecedented time where we have access to all of these different presentations of wisdom from all of these different cultures. So, what do we do about that? Well, this took me a long while. This was a year or two of deep study of all of these different methods. What I discovered was that they all point to a common essence. And the way I like to speak about this is I say, if I could have the Buddha over for tea and I got to ask him just one question, then what I'd ask Dr. Heath would be this. I would ask, if you could have just gotten away with telling people to chill out, is that what you would have done? And I strongly suspect that he would have said yes. And now the
Oh
monk
my
friend of
word,
mine,
that's amazing. Yeah.
I strongly suspect that would be his
Yeah,
answer.
chill
Now,
out, dude.
yeah, chill out. It's that simple. Now, we then, of course, when we hear an instruction like that, we say it can't possibly be that simple. In truth, it is. But all of these methods and practices that have been developed are for the purpose of helping that student out who says, "Give me something to do."
You know, I really agree with that. I really agree with that. And I don't mean to be a bit of a crank, but I think there may be, and I'll tell me your thoughts on this. There may be another reason. My son came home one day once he got into working out and was just over the moon with this new workout program that was going to change his body. And I said, where'd you get it? Well, out of the fitness magazine. And I said, why do you think that the fitness magazine would put a new workout program in it this week that they've never put in it before? That forget all that other stuff. This is the secret. Well, the reason is to sell magazines. And if you don't have something new to say, then people stop buying your stuff. And so you got to come up with new stuff. And I think in some sense it's that way. Well, it's certainly that way in psychology because, you know, the existentialist psychologists of us, we find great humor in all the new diagnoses. You know, it's the diagnosis of the month or the diagnosis of the week or the diagnosis of the day is your, you know, ADD or bipolar or something. But it's the same way in to some extent in mindfulness is we got to come up with new stuff or people stop buying our stuff. And I think there's a market to coaching people on the old ways and the simple ways that just has, but that's my take. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm in perfect agreement, Dr. Heath. In perfect agreement. And indeed, the further back we wind the clock, it seems the simpler things get. And I sometimes imagine, you know, who was the first meditator? Well, they didn't call it meditation. They were just sat on a log somewhere, being quiet, having a nice time. Now, of course, they had to watch out for predators, which is where a lot of our neuroses come from. But
Well, my predator when I'm meditating tends to be my wife. Yeah,
she's not in
yeah.
support.
Hey, what? Since you're not doing anything,
Yes, come and help me with this.
I've got a whole list. Yeah, she's great. Today's my wife's birthday, and
Hey,
I just hugged and kissed her happy birthday, and which brings me to my next point and my coffee is I tend to think of my meditation taking two forms. It's either presence based, where I will sit, I'll observe my breathing, I observe a flower and I have many flowers because my wife is, I guess, an amateur horticulturist and loves to plant things, and I love looking at the things she's planted. I have four hummingbirds that are part of our family that I feed every day, and they're waiting on me for breakfast every morning. I will be present in the moment with them. And then I have more process oriented meditation where I'm doing things.
Mm.
And the two main process related meditations I have, and I'm not even making this up. Well, of course, one is doing the barista thing and mindfully making my coffee. And I'm it's not that I'm not, I'm really fully present each step. But and this sounds maybe crazy to some people, but unloading the dishwasher every morning and loading it every night. And I love doing that because it's probably just one of the most meditative things that I do. Am I on the help me out there? What is that? Do you find that
This is
helpful?
perfect. This is perfect. And what you're demonstrating for our listeners here, my friend, is the bridge between formal meditation with strict uh, procedures and protocols, moving through to what I call the end game, which is where everything's a meditation. And therefore, in a sense, nothing is a meditation. We realize our natural meditative stability. And the way to get there is by indeed dishwasher meditation, coffee meditation, hummingbird meditation. And we just keep adding to our collection until we're never not meditating. And what happens then is we've completely dissolved the line between meditation and non-meditation.
Gosh, actually, I get chills hearing you talk about that because I think that is so right on point. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking of how well and often how not well I apply that to my relationship because I think that we can really improve relationships by having a meditative conversation instead of driving to get well with the dishwasher thing. I got to get it done. Got to get it done. I don't do that. It's just time really for me ceases to be. I'm just in the moment. There's a bit of a flow to it, and then with conversation, also the mistake I see people make in relationships is what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, and they don't do that. So, what do you think, other than what we talked about, trips up most people seeking a meditative practice or practice of meditation?
The one that I see the most, Dr. Heath, is making it a chore and then trying to use discipline to get it done. This never lasts. And, you know, discipline can get things done, right? Sure. But meditation in particular and mindfulness, it's really not a good fit. What we need to do instead is find ways, as you're doing, to make our meditation enjoyable. And we want to do it. And when we want to do it, we do it a lot. And when we do it a lot, we get the results we're after, right? So it's this total flip.
That's a great point. That's never dawned on me before that maybe when it comes to this, you're maybe doing it right, hitting that sweet spot when you begin to find value in it. And I'm always looking for moments. Some of my colleagues out there may criticize me for this, but I've actually been in the middle of a therapy session, and luckily we have a nice place to do therapy. It's the front porch uh, of our little studio where the flowers and the hummingbirds live, and we'll be out there in the middle of some conversation, and it's a complete non sequitur, and I'll say, "Wow, look at that cloud formation." And we'll stop whatever we're doing and observe it. Or I'll say, wow, see, there's my hummingbird. And we'll stop whatever we're doing, which really could be in the middle of a long story of how me and my wife had some big conflict or whatever, and we'll just put a bookmark right there and observe something. And I practice that in my life. Thich Nhat Hanh, for some of you meditators that have heard of him, one of the world famous meditators and teachers of that, founded Plum Village in France. In Plum Village, and you can, by the way, there's an app. There's a Plum Village app. I think they're still doing this, that they ring a bell. I think it's every hour, and no matter what you're doing, carrying water, I don't know, I guess maybe they don't argue in Plum Village, but arguing or whatever, you just stop and you practice, mindfulness for that 60 seconds. And I recommend often that people engineer that during their day. But what are some secrets? What would you recommend as some steps that people can take to get started and realistically and in real life add meditation as just a big part of their life?
So the bell is actually really effective. So aside from the practice that we might enact by ourselves, making our own reminders, I tell you, actually thinking of using our own mind, a mantra is really powerful. To use a single word, which could be some culturally relevant something. The Ram mantra is popular in India. The Om Mani Padme Hum mantra is popular from the Tibetan tradition, but it really doesn't have to be one of those traditional mantras. For the benefit of any of our listeners who are unfamiliar with the concept of mantra, it's just a repeated sound. And you can repeat it aloud, you can repeat it just in the mind verbally. But my first teacher's mantra was Coca-Cola. And I almost fell off my chair when he shared that with me. And he said, yeah, because he remembered when he was a little boy, Coca-Cola was a real treat. And he could remember the sound of the cap coming off and then the bubbles hitting his nose.
Oh, yeah.
So it really brought back this sense of joy. So that was a powerful mantra. Now, of course, it can also act as a reminder for us to remember our mindfulness practice. So we get used to, almost we make a habit of this repeated sound, and that brings us back to our practice to remember. However, if we need an external aid, then we can actually do exactly what Plum Village is doing. We can set up on our phone on a wonderful app called Insight Timer, which you might be familiar with. Similar
I
to
am
the Plum
not.
Village app.
Insight Timer?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll look that up.
Yeah. They have a timer on there which you can set up to ding on regular intervals. So you might start with an hour, and that will interrupt whatever you're doing. And that's a wonderful technique with your clients, by the way, Dr. Heath. Just wonderful to bring them out of whatever they're in into the present moment. Right. Really powerful. We can then go 45 minutes with our bell that just rings on our phone. We can actually set it to ring quite softly as well. So we can be quite covert with this. We might even get it running if you work in an office or if there's some other environment where it wouldn't be appropriate to have your phone making noise. You can just set it very quietly. 45 minutes, half an hour, 20 minutes. I think it will go as low as 5 minutes. You can get that little bell going off just to remind you. You can, at the time that it goes off, you can take a nice deep breath. Very strong part of mindfulness practice. And that's just kind of like a reset button, right? Just brings us out of whatever it is we're doing, stressing about the future, grieving over the past, whatever it is, whatever kind of neurosis rabbit hole we find ourselves tumbling down. Ding goes the bell. And then we've got that opportunity to remember to be present again.
That is so awesome. And I think that gets back to what you were saying earlier, of making mindfulness not a moment of our day, but making every moment full of mindfulness such that we're never out of that moment. And I think that also gets back to one of the complaints my patients have had, because what they really describe to me is what I would call, and I've heard it called, of course, it's not my thing, I borrowed it, the whole monkey mind thing, where, what is next and what is next, and I got to do this and I got to stop that. I've got to do this and do that other thing, which I call doo-doo brain. And we have to get out of our doo-doo brain and and focus on what is part of a the only label that I subscribe to is human being, and the last part of that is being, the first two letters B. So when you are practicing this, you are being who you are, which is a human being, not a human doing, but a human being. We all have our top mental struggles, and what would yours be? What are you working on currently?
Well, for me right now, things are pretty good. I would say, Dr. Heath, this practice that I've been fortunate enough to come into contact with, I really got it singing, and it's almost as though it does itself at this point,
Wow.
which acts as evidence that, one of the most attractive things that I heard one of my other teachers say, who I never actually met, but I just listened to this teacher's recordings over and over and over again, to the extent I call her my teacher. Her name is Ziji Rinpoche. She talks about how these qualities of meditative stability, of clarity, of openness, of joy, of peace are indeed our natural condition. She's a Tibetan lineage holder, and they speak in these terms very often. And I heard that and I said, well, I've got to check it out. I mean, whether or not it turns out to be true to me, that's such a strong pitch. I need to check that out. Could this be true for me? Could it be true that if I take this practice far enough, I can actually, like I say, dissolve that line between meditation and non-meditation and just live in that state? And I'm
Wow.
pleased to report it's possible. But
That's
the principal problem
amazing.
for me, yeah.
I've actually studied this for a great many years, not as deeply as you, but I've never heard that before. Thank you for that.
Mm, yeah.
I've never ever considered dissolving that boundary between non-meditation and meditation. That is fascinating. Um, well, let's look at this graphic here just really quick, and I saw this on Dan's website. I thought it was fabulous. Can you take us through this briefly here at the end of the show?
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. So this was a flowchart that came to mind as I was working with a particular student who was looping in a particular stage of his practice, and I said, let me zoom out for this student and see if I can make a visual that might be able to snap him out of this loop. So I went right back to the beginning, where we all start, we're dissatisfied with something. That's the first box there on the left. If we weren't dissatisfied with something, we wouldn't need a meditation practice. We wouldn't need mindfulness. We wouldn't need any kind of spiritual practice, whatever it is we want to call it. We wouldn't need therapy. We'd just be skipping along, happy with life, not a problem in the world. So here we are, we're dissatisfied with something. We have two options from here. If we go up to the top, we accept it as it is, and then of course we're good. No more dissatisfaction, no problem. If we go down though, we end up wishing that the thing we're dissatisfied with were different. And this is where all the problems start. This is where the loops can begin. If we go on here, we're still dissatisfied because we're wishing something were different. So we haven't solved our dissatisfaction. And if we stay in this condition, then we create the first loop that you see here, which is misery,
Oh, yeah.
right? We wish something were different, so we're dissatisfied. And then we're continuing to wish something were different, we're dissatisfied. We continue to wish it were different, we're dissatisfied, right? Now, if we're clever, then in that condition of misery, in that condition of perpetual dissatisfaction, we decide something needs to change. We decide we need some kind of help, either that we can apply ourselves or that we need some kind of intervention. We need a therapist, we need a spiritual teacher, we need someone who can help us out. And so we learn about spiritual practice, which is where we learn to accept the sensations of dissatisfaction as they are. So we're still not kind of trying to hop around here. We're not saying let's hop from the bottom boxes to the top and just try to magically accept things as they are somehow, because sometimes that just seems unavailable to us. It seems we really can't do that. So we take up a practice, we take up a method like meditation, for example, that helps us to accept the sensations of our dissatisfaction. Now, if we go back to being dissatisfied, then we're in that loop, which we call spiritual practice. Oh, I'm dissatisfied again. Well, let me accept those sensations of dissatisfaction by means of my practice, whatever it happens to be. I go round and around on my practice. And
Wow,
now
that is,
maybe at
I
some
love that.
point, yeah, but then at some point, hopefully that practice serves us well enough that we come finally into the condition of satisfaction and we're good.
Wow. And that is, I do want to point out that this is amazing, but I realize as Dan does, it's not simple, and I see people that they work on this. When I was at the VA doing my clinical rotations, I ran into folks from Vietnam.
Mm,
Of course, we had folks from World War II who had been struggling with trauma, post traumatic stress, and I like to leave off the D because I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's an injury, but that's a whole other
mm,
conversation. But they were struggling with post traumatic stress for decades, and it had cost them their health. It had cost them their career after the military. It had cost them their relationships. And when they got to that spiritual practice loop there, that's when healing began. And
yeah.
I think this could be applied to relationships. This could be applied to anything that we don't prefer in life. So thank you for that. How long ago did you come up with that?
Oh, that was a few months back.
Only a few months. Wow. Well, you need to put your name on that because that's genius. I
Mm,
love that. That is going to change people's lives, and I'm going to use that. I'll
you're
say
very
Dan
welcome
did
to
it,
it,
but
Dr.
I'll
Heath.
still use it.
You're very welcome.
Well, let's see. What can we leave our listeners with as kind of a affirmation or maybe mantra going into the weekend that they can get started on right away?
So I'd like to offer up this one, Dr. Heath. Calm, clarity, and confidence are my default mode.
Oh wow, calm, clarity. Now, I hate to push it, but how can we define calm? Because that sounds like such a simple concept that people get so overcomplicated, confused at. What is calm?
I would identify calm by the presence of acceptance,
Ah, that's the word that
right?
came to
So
mind as soon as you said that. It's
yeah,
acceptance.
yeah, and I like to make this point actually, Dr. Heath. I'm glad you paused here because we can get into a lot of trouble as meditators when we set a standard that says, "Oh, the mind should be perfectly quiet. I should have no thoughts." Right? I should think of nothing. I should
Good
never
luck with
use my
that.
own name. Right? Exactly. Good luck with that. Right? Because as you know very well, it's the nature of the mind to think.
Yeah, yeah.
If
People
we can
people tell
be,
me I can't stop my thoughts. I say, well, join the crowd. Me either. Do you know what it's called when you stop your thoughts? It's called death.
yeah, yeah. But we can, of course, change our relationship to our thoughts. And if we're not in resistance to them, if we're in acceptance of our thoughts, and friends, this doesn't mean that we might not want to change some of our thinking, but we don't have to do that immediately. And it doesn't require dissatisfaction with what's going on in the mind in order to make that change. We can make those changes based on wisdom and discernment just by seeing, hey, it's beneficial for me to change my thoughts. So let me see about that.
And
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 this is indeed,
also it's how you choose to look at it because
yeah,
it's now September and coming up in Arkansas, hopefully because I love snow, we'll have some snow. One of my favorite things to do is watch the falling snowflakes in a meditative way.
mm,
Well, the brain creates thoughts the way blizzards create snowflakes. Therefore, why are the snowflakes of my thoughts any more disturbing than the snowflakes of winter? And I observe them the same way. Hey, there's one. What do? I don't have to do anything. Hey, I mean, what do you do every time you see a snowflake? Chase it down. When I have a thought, it's just a thought. And I think that we could can look at those falling snowflakes of thoughts the same way, or you could choose clouds. Sometimes I view, thoughts as clouds passing across the blue sky of my awareness. And but just something to canoodle the noodles of our listeners out there is, from a psychological perspective, imagine this: I can experience anxiety in a meditative state, and I don't got to get rid of it. And even sitting here right now, I can feel my heart beating, ramping up because I'm doing this interview with Dan. I would call this anxiety, but it's okay. It interferes with nothing. It is part of my being. I don't have to change it, ramp it down. I don't got to get rid of it. It's just part of being a human. It's warm in this room, so I have some perspiration, probably in my armpits as well. I wash my shirt, no worries. But that's part of me as a being, and I can experience all this as part of being. And that's one thing, Dan, I find problematic in my field is people don't realize it, but they come to me expecting to not be human anymore. And my focus is teaching them how to be more human. And what you're saying, clarity. Calm, clarity. How would you define clarity?
Clarity would be also demonstrated by what we've just been speaking about: seeing things as they are, seeing that it is our nature to have thoughts. There's very little we can do about that. Now, things get confusing here again, Doctor, with some of the old meditation teachings make it sound as if what we're supposed to do is silence the mind. And I think it is possible for one to train themselves into that condition. But I would go so far as to say it's unnatural and unnecessary. Unnatural and unnecessary. Because indeed, we're going to have to get off that meditation cushion at some point, and then we're going to start having thoughts again.
Yep. Can't spend your life on a meditation cushion. Indeed.
Especially now, right? So a little context on these teachings is important.
That's awesome. And your third C?
Confidence. Yeah, not second guessing ourselves. Trusting that, yes, this is as I see it. Because of course it is. Of course it's as we see it. Now, someone else might have a different point of view. That's fine. But we can go ahead and be confident and say, this is how I'm seeing it, and I trust myself to see things as they are.
That's awesome. And we're here to do that. If we were here to have everyone else's experience, there'd be no need for us to be here.
Right.
As I always say, there's already one of everybody else. So just be you.
Yeah.
We don't need an additional one of everybody else. I mean, sometimes my wife is glad there's no more than one Heath in the house. Only one is needed. Two would be redundant. So yeah, just it's back to the human being. Just be and be you. It's only you that you could be. Be unique. YOUNIQUE. Dan, it has been fabulous having you on. I wish we could sit here and talk meditatively for hours. And I'm not making this up. Sometimes I'm pretty jazzed up when I'm doing these interviews, and I'm very emotive. But I'm going away from this one in a much calmer state. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you do for folks you work with, and for that 1,000,000,001. And thank you for letting me be that one today. You guys share this out with people that could use the mindful mental boost. You'll be doing them a favor. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.